As Jackson looked at his son sleeping peacefully, his thoughts drifted back to the years they'd managed to keep everything stable, even in the wake of Emma's abrupt disappearance. It was hard to believe it had been 3 years since she'd left, no goodbye, no explanation, just a painful silence that had settled over their lives. He and Ethan had built a new rhythm, filling the empty spaces with routines like these Friday movie nights. But tonight felt different. Something unsettling lingered in the air, a chill that went deeper than the autumn wind rattling the windows. Jackson's gaze lingered on Ethan, taking in the faint smile on his son's face even in sleep, his small hand still loosely clutching his game controller. He wanted to savor this moment of calm because he'd been feeling it for weeks, an unease that kept him up at night, gnawing at him like a warning he couldn't shake. Then, just as he tucked Ethan's controller aside, the silence shattered. A knock echoed through the house, slow, deliberate, and way too late for visitors. Jackson's heart pounded as he stood motionless, feeling the weight of that sound fill every inch of the room. The clock blinked 11:47, its dim glow somehow feeling sharper, casting an eerie light across the kitchen counter. He couldn't think of a single reason anyone would be here, especially at this hour. As he peered through the peephole, he felt the world tilt sideways. Standing there, illuminated by the porch light, was Emma, with her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, dressed in clothes that spoke of a life Jackson couldn't begin to recognize. And next to her, her sister, Natalie, her expression just as cold and calculating as he remembered. The door handle felt heavy under his hand as he opened it, his mind reeling, unable to reconcile the woman in front of him with the one who'd vanished from their lives. Jackson's voice was barely more than a whisper. "Emma? What are you doing here?" "Hello, Jackson," she said, her voice cool, almost businesslike, sending a chill down his spine. As Jackson picked him up, Ethan stirred a little but didn't wake, instinctively wrapping his arms around his dad's neck. "Bedtime, kiddo," Jackson whispered into his son's dark hair, breathing in the familiar scent of kids' shampoo and leftover pizza. Somehow, the house felt emptier at night, even with toys scattered around the floor and Ethan's drawings covering nearly every wall. Jackson had gotten used to filling the quiet with new routines and memories, though sometimes the silence brought questions he still couldn't answer. Heading upstairs with Ethan in his arms, Jackson walked past the wall of family photos he'd pieced together over the last 3 years. He'd removed most of the ones with Emma a few months back, accepting at last that she wasn't coming back, but he'd left a few, like one from a beach trip they took as a family. They all looked so happy then, Emma smiling brightly as she helped Ethan build sandcastles. 2 weeks after that photo, she vanished without a trace. "Daddy?" Ethan murmured as Jackson settled him into bed. "Yeah, buddy. Can we get pepperoni next Friday?" Ethan mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. Jackson grinned, pulling the Pokémon comforter up over his son's shoulders. "Of course, extra cheese, too." But Ethan was already out, his breathing steady and deep. Jackson stood there for a moment, amazed by how tough kids could be. Ethan had stopped asking about his mom months ago, though sometimes Jackson caught him studying the few photos left of her, head tilted like he was trying to solve a puzzle. The memories seemed to fade, like old photos left in the sun. Back downstairs, Jackson started cleaning up the mess from their movie night. As he loaded the dishwasher, his phone buzzed with a new email. Lisa from accounting had sent him another invitation for coffee. He'd brushed off her gentle hints for a while, but lately, he found himself considering it. 3 years felt like a long enough time to grieve a marriage that had ended with no explanation. He sat down at his laptop, staring at the email. Lisa was kind, smart, funny, and clearly interested. She'd even joined him and Ethan for ice cream once, impressing his son with her knowledge of Pokémon names. Jackson's finger hovered over the reply button when a sudden knock at the door made him freeze. The clock read 11:47 p.m., an odd hour for any visitor. His heart raced as he approached the door, running through possibilities, a neighbor with an emergency, or maybe someone who had the wrong address. Peeking through the peephole, he saw two women standing there, illuminated by the porch light. The world tilted as recognition hit him, Emma and her sister, Natalie. His ex-wife looked the same, yet completely changed. Her dark hair, once carelessly thrown into a messy bun, was now styled in sleek waves. Her makeup was flawless, even at this late hour, and she wore a tailored blazer that probably cost more than his mortgage. Her old sneakers had been replaced by designer heels. Jackson's hand trembled as he unlocked the door, his mind racing to grasp the shock of the moment. After 3 years of total silence, she was suddenly here, unannounced, in the middle of the night. "Hello, Jackson." Emma's voice was calm and professional, that same tone she'd used back in her days of handling difficult clients at her old real estate office. "Can we come in?" Jackson clutched the door frame, his knuckles going white. "It's midnight and Ethan's asleep." Perfect timing, then, Natalie interjected, her smile as sharp as a razor. She was dressed in an outfit nearly as costly as her sister's, her manicured nails tapping against a designer purse. Jackson's jaw tightened. Natalie had always been the one backing Emma's worst decisions, covering for her lies. Of course, she was here now, serving as backup for whatever scheme Emma had in mind. "Talk about what?" Jackson demanded, keeping his voice low so he wouldn't wake Ethan. "Where the hell have you been these past 3 years?" "That's complicated," Emma replied, glancing down at her polished nails. "But I'm here now, and I want my son back." The words hit Jackson like a punch to the gut, a storm of anger and disbelief swelling inside him. "Your son? You mean the one you abandoned without so much as a word? The one who can hardly remember your face?" "I had no choice," Emma shot back, her cool exterior starting to crack. "You have no idea what I've been through. But I'm ready now. I'm his mother, and it's my right." Jackson let out a bitter laugh. "You're right. You gave up any rights when you walked away from us. Ethan is happy and stable, and I'm not going to let you waltz back in and ruin that." "Let us in, Jackson," Natalie insisted, moving a step closer. "We can talk about this like adults. There's nothing to discuss. It's the middle of the night, and you both need to leave." Emma stepped closer, her expensive perfume washing over him, a stark contrast from the woman who used to steal his old t-shirts to sleep in. "I'm not going anywhere. I've already spoken to lawyers. You can't keep my child from me forever. Just watch me." Jackson's voice came out cold as ice. "Ethan is my son. I'm the one who's been here, picking up the pieces, making a life for him. To him, you're just a stranger he shares some DNA with." "You're a bitter, pathetic man," Natalie hissed, her perfectly painted lips twisting in contempt. "Can't you see that Emma is here to make things right?" "Right?" Jackson let out a hollow laugh. "Nothing about this is right. Showing up in the dead of night, demanding things. There's something else going on here, and I'm going to find out what it is." "You always were paranoid," Emma replied smoothly, though he caught a flicker of unease in her eyes. "I only want to reconnect with my son. Surely you can understand that." "What I understand is that you're still the same self-centered person who left without a word. Nothing's changed, except your wardrobe." He squared his shoulders, standing to his full height. "Get off my property before I call the cops." "This isn't over," Emma warned, though she took a small step back. "I have rights. I will see my son." "Your rights?" Jackson's voice lowered, laced with anger. "Let me tell you about the rights you walked away from. You had the right to be there when Ethan lost his first tooth. You had the right to see him graduate from kindergarten. You had the right to be by his side as he learned to read. But you gave all that up the moment you walked out on us 3 years ago." "You don't understand," Emma began, but Jackson cut her off sharply. "No, you're the one who doesn't understand. While you were off living your new life, I was here. I was here when Ethan woke up with nightmares, scared because his mom had left. I was here when he cried on every birthday you missed. I was the one rebuilding our lives after you tore them apart. Natalie stepped in, her eyes blazing. How dare you? You have no idea what my sister. Save it, Jackson snapped, cutting her off. I don't care about whatever excuses you've dreamed up. If you want to talk, you can go through my lawyer, during business hours, like normal people. Now, get off my property. He slammed the door in their faces, twisting the deadbolt with trembling hands. Peering through the window, he watched them make their way back to a sleek black Mercedes. Of course, everything about Emma screamed money now. Jackson sank onto the couch, his head spinning. The half-eaten pizza on the coffee table, Ethan's scattered Pokemon cards, the remnants of the Paw Patrol show on Netflix, all the pieces of their ordinary, happy night now felt like they belonged to some distant past. A noise from upstairs made him freeze. He rushed up, taking the stairs two at a time, fearing that the argument had woken Ethan. But his son lay sleeping soundly, one arm wrapped around his favorite Pikachu plush. Jackson stood in the doorway, watching his little boy breathe, willing his own racing heart to slow down. I won't let her hurt you again, he whispered. I promise. Back downstairs, Jackson pulled out his phone, hands still trembling slightly as he typed, "Best custody lawyers near me," into the search bar. None of this was adding up, Emma's sudden return, the flashier lifestyle, that hint of desperation when he'd called her out. A memory surfaced, Emma's and Natalie's voices drifting in from the porch as they left. He's not going to make this easy, Natalie had said. It doesn't matter. We don't have a choice anymore. Don't have a choice. Jackson's mind, trained from years in corporate forensic accounting, snapped into action. There was more to this story, and he was determined to find out exactly what it was. He opened his laptop and created a new folder labeled, Custody Case. Inside, he began jotting down everything he could remember from tonight, Emma's new appearance, her words, that pricey car. Every detail might end up matching. Next, he started looking up private investigators, noting the most highly rated ones in his area. Tomorrow, he'd start building his case, but for tonight, he needed to make sense of the earthquake that had shaken their carefully rebuilt world. The family photos on the wall seemed to mock him now. Methodically, he began removing every last image of Emma, including that beach photo he'd been too sentimental to take down until now. Their life together, the unanswered questions, the memories of why she left, none of that mattered anymore. The only thing that mattered was keeping Ethan safe. Jackson stared at the small stack of photos he held in his hands. 3 years ago, he'd been too devastated to even consider getting rid of them. Now, he felt nothing but a cold resolve as he dropped them into the kitchen trash. His phone buzzed, it was Lisa's email, still sitting there, waiting for a reply. Without even opening it, Jackson deleted the message. Dating would have to wait. Right now, every bit of his focus had to go toward protecting his son. The clock struck midnight as Jackson started calling his closest friends, the ones who'd stood by him when Emma left. He needed a solid support system for the road ahead. Hey, Mike. Sorry for calling so late. Look, I need your help with something. As Jackson explained everything to his friend, his resolve only grew stronger. Emma could play all the games she wanted, show off her money and make her threats. She'd already left her son once, Jackson would make damn sure she never got the chance to do it again. Upstairs, Ethan mumbled something in his sleep, and Jackson felt his determination deepen. Together, they'd built something good, something real. No one, neither Emma, nor Natalie, nor an army of fancy lawyers, was going to tear that apart. He worked through the night, making lists and formulating plans, his accountant's mind breaking down each step into manageable pieces. By dawn, he had a preliminary action plan in place: hire the best custody lawyer in town, find a private investigator, document everything about Ethan's life, school records, medical reports, photos of their daily routines. Install security cameras, notify Ethan's school about any potential custody issues. As the sun began to rise, Jackson finally let himself take a moment to rest. He went upstairs to check on Ethan one last time, watching his son's peaceful face in the soft early morning light. "We're going to be okay, buddy," he whispered. "I promise." Almost as if he heard, Ethan smiled in his sleep, clutching his Pikachu even tighter. Jackson brushed his son's hair gently, then headed downstairs to start the coffee maker. He knew it was going to be a long day, but he was ready. Emma could bring her worst, Jackson would bring everything he had. And he had truth, love, and 3 years of dedication on his side. The fight for Ethan was just beginning, but Jackson had already won the battle for his loyalty and trust long ago. Picking up his phone, he dialed the first number on his list. It was time to take action. Monday morning's rain pattered against the windows of Marcus Quinn's cramped downtown office. Jackson sat in a worn leather chair, watching the private investigator sift through his notes. The office walls were covered with photos of past cases and yellowed newspaper clippings, testaments to Marcus's many successes. Marcus had a reputation for cracking even the toughest divorce cases. "So," Marcus said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "start from the beginning. When exactly did she show up?" "Friday night, just before midnight. She and her sister appeared on my doorstep, like ghosts." Marcus typed quickly on his keyboard. "And you said she looked different?" "Completely. Designer clothes, flawless makeup, expensive jewelry. The Emma I knew wore yoga pants and shopped clearance racks." "Money changes people," Marcus replied, his fingers moving swiftly across the keys, "or rather, it reveals who they really are. Full name, Emma Grace Edwards, though she might have changed it. Current address is unknown, but her sister Natalie lives at 1542 Oak Grove Road, in the ritzy part of town." The investigator nodded, jotting down notes. "So, tell me about the Mercedes." Jackson pulled out his phone and showed the photo he'd managed to snap discreetly. "Black S-Class. Partial plate reads KRX. Looks brand new. Sharp eye." Marcus studied the picture closely. "That's a car worth at least $100 grand. Your ex-wife's definitely had a lifestyle upgrade." "That's what I don't get," Jackson said, leaning forward. "She used to shop sales and clip coupons. Now she's wearing shoes that cost more than my mortgage payment. People don't just change that drastically on their own." "Someone's backing her financially," Marcus murmured thoughtfully. A sudden knock interrupted them. Marcus's assistant, Sarah, poked her head in. "Mr. Carter, your son's school is on line 1. They say it's urgent." Jackson's heart jumped to his throat. "Excuse me," he said, grabbing the phone. "This is Jackson Carter." "Mr. Carter, this is Principal Adams." The normally calm voice of the principal now held a tight, worried edge. "There's been an incident. Could you come to the school?" "What kind of incident?" Jackson was already standing, reaching for his jacket. "Mr. Carter, your ex-wife tried to check Ethan out of class. When we refused, she caused a scene. She's demanding to see him. I'm on my way. Don't let her anywhere near my son." "Of course. We've got security with him now." "Them?" "Yes, she's here with her sister. They're both being very insistent." Jackson turned to Marcus. "I need to go." "Go take care of your son," Marcus said, straightening his tie. "I'll dig deeper and meet with you tomorrow at the same time. How much do you need to get started?" $2,000 as a retainer, but given the car and clothes, this case might get costly." Jackson wrote the check without a second thought. "Whatever it takes, I want to know everything." 20 minutes later, Jackson rushed through the school's main entrance. The secretary recognized him immediately and pointed toward the principal's office. Through the glass partition, he could see Ethan sitting calmly in a chair, playing his switch, completely oblivious to the chaos around him. Emma and Natalie stood by the principal's desk, their raised voices carrying even through the closed door. "I am his mother." Emma's voice cracked with anger. "You have no right to keep him from me." "As I've explained, Mrs. Edwards," Principal Adams replied, her tone calm and controlled, "we follow strict custody procedures. Without the proper court documentation, I have rights." Emma shouted, slamming her designer purse onto the desk. "I carried him for 9 months. And then left him for 3 years, Jackson said as he strode through the door. "The only right you have now is to walk away. Now." Emma whipped around, her heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. Her blazer likely cost more than most teachers made in a month. "You can't keep doing this, Jackson. You can't keep my son from me. Just watch me." Jackson turned to Ethan, his voice softening. "Hey, buddy. Ready to head home?" Ethan looked up, his face flooding with relief. "Dad." He ran to Jackson, wrapping his small arms around his dad's waist, keeping his back to Emma, his face buried in Jackson's jacket. "You see," Emma spat, her voice sharp with accusation, "you've turned him against me. He won't even look at me. You did that yourself the moment you walked out." Jackson turned to Principal Adams. "I'm taking my son home, and I want it noted that these women are not permitted to contact him." "Of course, Mr. Carter. We'll update our records right away." "Jackson, please," Emma took a step closer, her expensive perfume filling the small office. "Just 5 minutes with him, that's all I'm asking. He's my child, too. You should have thought about that 3 years ago when you left without a single word." He led Ethan toward the door, but Natalie moved to block their path. "You're being heartless," she said, her heels firmly planted. "Emma's been through." "Move," Jackson said, his voice steely. "Or I'll call security. It's up to you." Whatever she saw in his face made Natalie step aside. As they walked toward his car, he heard Emma's voice echoing down the hall. "This isn't over, Jackson. You can't keep him from me forever." In the car, Ethan was unusually quiet, his switch resting in his lap, forgotten. "You all right, buddy?" Jackson asked, watching him in the rearview mirror. "Why does that lady keep saying she's my mom?" Jackson's heart squeezed. "Because she is, but that doesn't change a thing between us, okay? I don't remember her." "I know, buddy. I know." Later that evening, after Ethan was finally asleep, Jackson's phone rang. "Marcus found something interesting," the investigator said without any introduction. "You might want to sit down for this." Jackson dropped into his office chair. "I'm sitting." "Your ex-wife's been living quite the life. According to real estate records, she's been staying in a penthouse at the Grand. You know it, the new high-end high-rise downtown. Those apartments are insanely expensive. 15 grand a month, to be precise." Marcus paused for impact. "But here's where things get juicy. The apartment is leased to a Derek Montgomery. Ring a bell?" "Name's not familiar." "Big shot investment banker. Made headlines last year over some suspicious trades. Divorced, no kids, and has a thing for dating younger women, especially the ones in rocky marriages." Jackson's hand clenched into a fist. "She left us for him." "Looks that way. Lots of social media posts of the two of them, luxury vacations in the Maldives, charity galas, shopping sprees in Paris. They've been together since shortly after she left. Possibly even before." "When did it end?" "That's the interesting part. Everything stops 3 months ago. No more posts, no public appearances. Here's the kicker, Montgomery is under investigation for fraud. The SEC is breathing down his neck. So he ditches her when things get rough, and suddenly she remembers she has a son." "It gets better," Marcus said, the sound of rustling papers in the background. I found court records. She's being sued by multiple creditors, credit card debt, unpaid loans. She's broke, Jackson, and desperate. Jackson took in the information, feeling the pieces slot into place. She's after Ethan because she needs a financial safety net. She's using him to make her case look sympathetic in court. Smart guy. Want me to keep digging? Everything. I need rock-solid evidence on every detail. Over the following 2 weeks, Emma and Natalie continued to push, showing up at Ethan's soccer practices, even attempting to catch him at the park. Each time, Jackson stood his ground. But he started noticing things, small signs that Emma hardly knew her son at all. During one encounter at the park, she brought him an expensive skateboard. "Look what I got you, sweetie," she cooed. Ethan ducked behind Jackson. "I don't like skateboards." "Since when?" Emma laughed. "You used to beg me for one." "He fell last year," Jackson replied coldly. "Broke his arm. You'd know that if you'd been around." Another time, she tried to win him over with a memory she had clearly made up. "Remember when we used to go camping? Making s'mores by the fire?" Ethan looked at her, baffled. "We never went camping. Dad hates bugs." Jackson watched Emma's smile falter. She was reciting lines, playing the role of a mother without knowing the script. Soon after, the custody papers arrived. His lawyer, Patricia Chen, called him early one morning. "They're asking for joint custody," she explained, claiming Emma left due to severe depression and is now recovered and ready to take on motherly duties. "Bull," Jackson muttered, pacing the kitchen. "What's our chance here?" "Honestly? They're clutching at straws. These papers are riddled with inconsistencies. But we should be prepared to fight. They're trying to make you out as an alienating father. I've got a PI on it, and he's found some good leads." "Perfect. We'll need everything we can get." That afternoon, Marcus showed up at Jackson's house with a thick folder in hand. "Got it all," he said, spreading photos across the kitchen table. 3 years of proof. Her affair started even before she left. "I found hotel receipts and a hidden email account." Montgomery promised her a dream life, and she went for it. Jackson examined the photos, Emma and a silver-haired man on a yacht in the Mediterranean, at high-end restaurants in New York, walking into their penthouse together, her hand gripping his arm possessively. "Check out the dates," Marcus pointed. "This one's from 2 weeks before she disappeared. She was already living it up while pretending to be the family woman with you. She threw us away for this?" Jackson's voice was hollow. "Money can be addictive. But it gets juicier." Marcus pulled out the bank statements. "She helped Montgomery stash funds to dodge the SEC, set up offshore accounts in her name, moved money around. Now, she's caught up in his fraud investigation. That's why she's here. She needs a clean slate, and what better way than to play the part of the concerned mother?" Just then, Jackson's phone buzzed, a new text from Emma. "Please, we need to talk about Ethan. I know I messed up, but I've changed, *. Jackson showed the message to Marcus. "Think we've got enough?" Marcus grinned, patting the hefty folder. "More than enough. It's time to end this charade." Jackson texted back, "Come over tomorrow, 7 p.m., just you and Natalie." The response came instantly. "Thank you, Jackson. You won't regret this, *. "Oh, but you will," Jackson muttered. That night, once Ethan was finally asleep, Jackson sorted through all the evidence, compiling a watertight case, photos, bank records, court filings, every lie in manipulation laid bare. As he worked, the gentle hum of Ethan's nightlight filtered down from upstairs, a constant reminder of exactly why he was fighting. His phone buzzed with yet another message, this time from his sister, *. "Come on, Jackson. She's really trying. Give her a chance, *. He ignored it, setting his focus on the task ahead. Tomorrow, he would end this charade for good. Let them come with their demands and lawyers. He had the truth on his side and hard evidence to back it up. The wall clock ticked as he worked, each second bringing him closer to the confrontation that would determine Ethan's future. Outside, the city lay still and quiet, oblivious to the brewing storm inside Jackson's home. He stacked the last document and slid it into a folder. Tomorrow would change everything, and he was ready. When the clock struck midnight, he finally lay down, but sleep wouldn't come. The conversation kept playing in his head, each scene unfolding in different ways. One thing was crystal clear, though: he would protect his son no matter what. Let them come. He was ready. By evening, the air was thick with anticipation as Jackson arranged the evidence on his oak dining table. Each document, photo, and bank statement represented another layer of Emma's betrayal, meticulously collected by Marcus over the past few weeks. The clock ticked toward 7, each second pulling him closer to the showdown he'd been gearing up for. His phone buzzed, a message from his sister, Sarah. *** Ethan's doing great. Already beat me twice at Mario Kart, ***. Jackson managed a small smile, then returned to his preparations. The folders were laid out chronologically, from the first signs of Emma's affair to the latest financial records revealing just how desperate she was. Marcus had gathered even more than Jackson had expected. At 6:55 p.m., headlights cut across the living room as a familiar black Mercedes glided into the driveway. Jackson squared his shoulders, making sure his phone was recording, his lawyer's suggestion, just in case. The doorbell's chime sounded louder than ever in the stillness of the house. Jackson opened the door to find Emma and Natalie standing there, dressed more like corporate executives than women here for a family discussion. Emma wore an expensive blazer, though Jackson noticed a loose thread on the cuff, her polished image already starting to unravel. "Come in," he said coolly, stepping aside. Emma's eyes flitted around the living room, taking in the changes since she'd been gone, all traces of her removed, new furniture, new photos, a new life. The carefully arranged family pictures she'd left behind had been replaced with images of just Jackson and Ethan. "Where's Ethan?" she asked, clutching her designer bag tightly. "He's with Sarah. This isn't a conversation for him." "Jackson," Natalie started, her tone patronizing, "we came here to discuss." "Dining room," he cut her off, his voice firm. "Now." They followed, their heels clicking on the hardwood floors like a countdown. When they saw the folders spread across the table, both women's confidence wavered as they paused in their well-rehearsed entrance. "What is all this?" Emma's voice carried an unfamiliar hint of uncertainty. "Sit down." Jackson gestured to the chairs. "We need to discuss why you're really here." "We told you why," Natalie began, but Jackson's sharp look shut her down. "Sit." Something in Jackson's tone compelled them to sit. He remained standing, holding the first folder, marked neatly with today's date and Montgomery evidence, in his careful handwriting. 3 years, he began, his voice steady and controlled. 3 years without a word. No calls, no letters, not even a birthday card for your son. Then suddenly, you show up demanding custody. It didn't make sense. "I told you, I was dealing with depression," Emma tried to cut in. "No," Jackson's voice was sharp, unyielding. "You fed me lies. Let's start with where you actually were." He opened the folder. "The grand, penthouse apartment. 15 grand a month in rent." Color drained from Emma's carefully made-up face. "Paid for by Derek Montgomery," Jackson continued, dropping photo after photo onto the table. "Your lover. The real reason you left us. These are private." Natalie snapped, trying to grab the photos, but Jackson's hand pinned them down. "Private, like the offshore accounts? The secret money transfers?" He spread out bank statements showing transaction after transaction. "You didn't just abandon your family, Emma. You helped Montgomery commit fraud. You don't understand, Emma's voice broke as tears welled in her eyes. Derek promised me everything, the life I'd always wanted. Save the tears, Jackson cut her off. They might work on your rich boyfriends, but I know better. 3 years of marriage, watching you cry your way out of things, taught me enough. How dare you? Natalie stood, her chair scraping the floor. You have no idea what my sister has been through. Jackson laughed coldly, the sound reverberating through the room. Actually, I do. Marcus is thorough. He pulled out another folder. Let's talk about your so-called suffering, shall we? 5-star restaurants in Paris while Ethan cried himself to sleep. Luxury getaways to the Maldives while I worked 2 jobs to pay off the debts you left behind. Charity galas where you pretended you'd never been married, never had a child. You had me followed. Emma's tears vanished, her face hardening. No, I had you investigated. Big difference. Jackson pulled out more documents. Want to know what I found? You were seeing Montgomery 6 months before you left. Hotel receipts prove it. You helped him stash money from the SEC, opened offshore accounts in your name, and enjoyed the high life until he dropped you 3 months ago when the investigation got close. Now you're broke, facing fraud charges, and suddenly you remember you have a son. That's not true, Emma stammered, her voice trembling. Jackson slid the papers across the table. Here's your signature on those offshore accounts. Here's your joint credit card statements showing millions in spending. Here's the lawsuit from your creditors. Need me to go on? Natalie jumped in, her heels clicking anxiously on the floor. Everyone makes mistakes, Jackson. Emma's here to make things right. Mistakes? Jackson's voice grew louder. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. She abandoned her child, vanished without a word. Do you have any idea what that does to a kid? How many nights I spent explaining to a 4-year-old why his mom didn't love him enough to stay. I had my reasons. Emma yelled, her mascara starting to streak. You have no idea what it's like, feeling trapped in this suburban life. Trapped? Jackson slammed another folder onto the table. You had a family who loved you, a son who adored you, a husband who trusted you. But that wasn't enough, was it? You needed more. Derek promised me everything I'd ever dreamed of. Except he failed to mention the fraud investigation, didn't he? Jackson's voice dripped with sarcasm. Left out the part about the SEC closing in on him. Then he dumps you, freezes the accounts, and now you show up here, playing the role of a grieving mother. I've changed, Emma pleaded, her tears flowing freely now. These last few months have been a living hell. Hell of your own making, Jackson's voice was icy. And now you want to drag Ethan into it? Use him as your safety net? He's my son. No. Jackson straightened, his full height imposing. He's my son. I'm the one who's been here, every nightmare, every scraped knee, every school play. While you lived it up with your criminal boyfriend, I was building a stable, happy life for Ethan. And I'll do whatever it takes to protect that. We have rights, Natalie interjected, pulling a set of papers from her designer briefcase. We've already spoken with our lawyers. So have I. Jackson pulled out one last folder, filled with custody papers and evidence of Emma's fraud involvement, her abandonment of Ethan, and her financial desperation. Sign them. Emma stared at the papers, her hands shaking. You can't be serious. Dead serious. Sign away your parental rights, or this evidence goes to the SEC. Your call. That's blackmail, Natalie gasped, clutching her sister's arm. No, that's justice. Jackson slid a pen across the table. Think carefully, Emma. Prison orange doesn't suit you. Emma's hand shook as she reached for the pen. I could fight this, she whispered, though her voice held no strength. Sure, and lose everything. Courts don't look kindly on parents who abandon their kids to live with a criminal boyfriend. Sign these papers, and this evidence stays between us. Challenge me, and everyone will know what you did. Silence filled the room as Emma stared down at the documents, her mascara-streaked tears smudging the pristine pages. Finally, she whispered, "Can I at least say goodbye to him?" "No," Jackson's voice was solid, unmovable. "You forfeited that right 3 years ago. Sign the papers and leave." More tears fell as Emma scrawled her name, the sound of the pen scratching against paper the only noise in the room. Natalie grabbed her sister's arm, helping her up. "This isn't over," Natalie hissed, her manicured nails digging into her designer purse. "Yes, it is." Jackson gathered the signed papers. "You have 30 seconds to get out before I call the cops. And if either of you ever comes near my son again, the SEC gets every piece of evidence I've collected. Copies are already ready to go." Emma's sobs echoed down the hallway as they hurried out. Jackson watched through the window as their Mercedes pulled away, the taillights fading like the last remnants of his old life disappearing into the night. Jackson's phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "Ethan's asking when he can come home." Jackson felt a weight lift, lighter than he'd felt in ages. "On my way," he replied. Before he left, he tucked the evidence folders safely into his home safe. He'd keep them, just in case, though deep down, he knew they wouldn't be needed. Emma had chosen money over family once, now she'd have neither. 20 minutes later, Jackson pulled up to Sarah's house, and Ethan came running out, his Pokemon backpack bouncing against his back. "Dad," he shouted, launching himself into Jackson's arms. "Aunt Sarah let me stay up late. We had ice cream and watched 2 movies." Jackson hugged him, taking in his familiar scent of kid shampoo and chocolate. "Did she now?" Sarah appeared in the doorway, smiling. "He beat me at every game. I think he's been practicing." "You let me win," Ethan protested, clinging to his dad. "Did not. You're just too good for your old aunt." Later that night, as Jackson tucked Ethan into his own bed, he felt a peace settle over him. The photos on the walls showed their real life together, father and son at the park, at soccer games, building snowmen. No shadows from the past, no lingering ghosts of abandonment. "Dad," Ethan murmured sleepily, clutching his favorite Pikachu plush. "Yeah, buddy. Are those ladies coming back? The one who says she's my mom?" Jackson gently smoothed his son's hair, so much like his own. "No, buddy. They're gone for good." "Good. I like it just us." "Me too, buddy. Me too." Later, in his office, Jackson sent final messages to his lawyer and Marcus, confirming that everything had been taken care of. His phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, * glad it worked out. "She won't risk coming back with what we uncovered, *. Jackson glanced at the most recent photo on his desk, a snapshot of him and Ethan at last week's soccer game, both of them grinning, their hair windswept. This was their life now, simple, happy, complete. Let Emma keep her designer bags and luxury dreams. Jackson and Ethan had everything they needed right here. Tomorrow, they'd have pizza and movie night, just like always. No more watching their backs, no more surprise visitors. Just a father and son, creating their future together. The past was finally, truly behind them. Jackson closed his laptop, listening to the quiet sounds of Ethan sleeping upstairs. Together, they had weathered the storm and come through stronger. Outside, the autumn wind had calmed, leaving the night quiet and still. Inside, the house felt warm, secure, a fortress protecting the family that mattered, the family they'd built together. Jackson smiled as he headed upstairs to bed. Tomorrow was a new day, and for the first time in weeks, he knew exactly what it would bring, just him and Ethan, just as it should be.